Okay. Am I live? What's going on? Am I live or not? Manage videos. Yay, we're live. We are live. I've been getting no views. Na 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 Oh. No way. Na 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 na. Session cookie. Alright, I'm gonna spend 1 hour on this real quick. I have this church app that I'm doing. Someone requested a new feature here. I'm gonna ask some questions about it real quick. And then and then I'm gonna continue working on this. Okay, so we have Google you guys can see this, my note taking. Nope, Should I make this document in the ESLM account? Yeah, I should probably. Alright. Edit user emails. So the requirements, you know what, I can just do it here in the code editor. You know what, I'll just do it right here. Edit user email. Close these for now. And then, alright, so right now, our auth understanding. So, the app supports Google login. Login starts in Google, then your backend verifies the Google ID token and creates. So login starts in Google. Our Supabase backend plus Supabase verifies the Google ID. Verifies the Google ID. What does that mean? What does that mean exactly? Does that mean there's a Google ID? Oh, there is a Google ID. So, like, Google ID is literally just numeric. It's like is 1 0, something like this. So the backend verifies the Google ID and creates. After verification, creates or updates an app level user in public.user schema. Okay. Yes, authenticated app users are persisted in public user. Current schema. But this is not Supabase auth. Google OAuth. It's Google OAuth plus nest backend session cookie. Found Supabase migrations, but no runtime code. Okay. So the workflow is we have our login page, our Google login button in the UI. Google returns ID to token credential. Post auth Google to your backend. Backend verifies Google token. Backend upserts public user by Google ID. Backend signs app JWT. Oh, I don't know what that is. JWT stored in HTTP session cookie. UI calls auth logged in. And 10. Auth wrapper stores logged in user in React context. Protected pages roles menu access. So login TSX. I think it's simpler to just do this. Login button. Wait. Bruh. Login page renders the auth screen. Google sign-in button is shown by that. On success, the UI sends credentials response credential to back. Okay. What this means for email editing. If you edit email in public user, that does not necessarily change the email the person logs in with at Google. The current behavior is Google sends email in the token. Yeah, backend trusts that token payload. Backend overwrites. Manual edit could be reverted the next time the user logs in, unless you also change the auth sync behavior. There's a second implementation. Email is used to match a Google authenticated person, a member record during login. The coupling is here. Oh God. If you add edit email in public user, manual admin edit. Sends email in the token. Backend trusts that token payload. Backend overwrites public user email from Google on each login. Should I test what happens right now with this database? Because right now, you cannot edit the emails. I'm not gonna go to it because there's like personal emails on there. I could edit my own email, and I don't know what's gonna happen if I edit this. Right? If I edit that to another valid email and log in through that, what happens? So manual edit to public user email could be reverted the next time the user logs in. Should that be a new email is used to match a Google authentication person to a member record during login. The coupling is here. Yeah, that is a problem. Now that might be a problem because, well, members are that's a totally different Yeah. I'm again wasting my time again. I need to focus. Okay, no more wasting time. Come on, straight up. I need to clarify a few things. I don't even know how the authentication works, so I'm just gonna go ahead and try to understand it. So login.tsx has the auth screen. Google sign-in button is shown by Google auth Google React OAuth Google. Okay, React OAuth Google. Gotcha. React OAuth Google. React OAuth. We have it. We have that right there. Create response. Credential response. So why not just, oh, it's a type. Okay. Use is logged in. Auth, set auth. Use auth, authentication. So Google sign-in button on success the UI sends credential response dot credential to our backend. Oh. Okay. So we start at auth screen. So I'm gonna make, I guess I can make a diagram. So one is definitely login TSX login screen. Auth screen. Well, it technically starts at auth screen. The button. Google login button. On success, so here, success equals await API string auth Google. There. Nice. The fuck is Sonar? What is that? Okay, so body JSON stringify credential. So what actually happens here? We send that to Google, or we call a backend function called auth Google with a credential response, right? The hell is that? What is a credential response? I'm assuming this is an input. Async credential response. Credential response. Set is logged in. Const success equals await API string. What is this? Auth Google method post body stringify. Alright, well, that's cool, I guess. And then okay, so UI sends credential response dot credential to your backend. We send that to our backend. Main.tsx. Create router. What is that doing? '82. Google OAuth Writer. Invite Google Client ID. What does that do? Okay. I don't know what this does. Not sure what this the backend endpoint for login. Backend endpoint for login is post available. It calls auth service and then sets an HTTP only session cookie. It sets a session cookie. This is session cookie. Okay, I need to understand how authentication works first. I'm gonna go on YouTube and search how authentication works. Web app. How does that work? Session versus token authentication.
Sessions and tokens. The user authentication. There are two main ways to get the job done: sessions and tokens. The traditional approach on the web is cookie-based server-side sessions. The process begins with a traditional approach on the web is cookie-based server-side sessions. The process begins with a user filling out their username and password and then submitting to get the job done. Sessions and tokens. The traditional approach on the web is cookie-based server-side sessions.
Cookie-based server-side session.
The process begins with a user filling out their username and password and then submitting it to a server, which then validates it, creates a session in the database, then responds with a session ID. The session ID will be saved in the browser's cookie. Filling out their base. And responds with a session ID. The session ID will be saved in the browser cookie jar. Which is a place in the browser to save key value pairs that will be sent back to the server on each subsequent request. Responds with a session ID. The session ID will be saved in the browser's cookie jar, which is a place in the browser to save key value pairs that will be sent back to the server on each subsequent request. It can then respond back with content designed for the currently logged in user, and then out their username and password, and then submitting it to a server, which then validates it, creates a session in the database, then responds with a session ID. The session ID will be saved in the browser's cookie jar, which is a place in the browser to save key value pairs that will be sent back to the server on each subsequent request. It can then respond back with content designed for the currently logged in user. In other words, we have a stateful session between the front-end client and back-end server. This approach works great, but there are some drawbacks. It can be vulnerable to an attack known as cross-site request forgery, where the attacker points the user to a site they're logged into and
CSRF.
An attack known as cross-site request forgery, where the attacker points the user to a site they're logged into to perform actions they didn't intend to, like submitting a payment or changing their password. Although the risk is very low, especially if you use a modern framework to implement your code. The bigger problem is that you'll need to store the session ID in a database or keep it in memory on the server. Because most of today's cloud applications are low, especially if you use a modern framework to implement your code. The bigger problem is that
storing session in the server.
You'll need to store the session ID in a database or keep it in memory on the server. Because most of today's cloud applications are scaled horizontally, this can be a huge bottleneck in production. And that brings us to token-based authentication.
Can be huge bottleneck since horizontal
scaled horizontally.
Scaling is common these days. So we have token-based authentication.
This can be a huge bottleneck in production challenges, which solves this problem, but introduces its own set of challenges. The process begins the same, with the client sending its login details to the server. Instead of storing a session ID, it generates a JSON web token. The JOT is created with a private key on the server. Then it's sent back to the browser where it's normally kept in local storage. On future requests, the JOT
Local storage? In JWT, when the server sends JWT back, does the browser store the JWT in local disk? So my computer. Oh. Wait, so what's the difference between storing that? What is the difference between storing that JWT data in my local disk versus cookie-based authentication where you store it in the cookie jar? Is the cookie jar not local disk? If it's storing in the browser, wouldn't it be also local disk? Both are indeed stored on your local disk. The physical location is the same, but the rules for how the browser handles them are completely different. Okay, so they're both local storage. Think of it like the difference between putting a note in your pocket versus putting a locked safe that only the bank teller can open. So cookies are like saved inside. Okay. Any JavaScript on your page can read it. HTTP only flag can be hidden from JavaScript. Okay, so it's different.
Will be added to the authorization header.
What?
Prefix and local storage. On future requests, the JOT will be added to the authorization header.
On future requests, JWT is added to the auth header.
Prefixed by bearer. The server then only needs to validate the signature. There's no
there's no need to check with session like something stored in the server, just logical check. Is that the right idea? It is also said that token-based auth sends JWT added to the auth header prefixed by bearer. And then the server only needs to check the signature. First confirm. Can you clarify what this signature would look like with example? And confirm there is no need.
no need for a database lookup somewhere else in the infrastructure.
Yeah. The bottleneck, the big bottleneck with session based auth was the DB lookup if we ever horizontally scale. Now that is no longer a problem. You've hit the nail on the head regarding horizontal scaling because the server doesn't need to remember the session in a database. Any server in your cluster can validate the user instantly. The JWT has 3 parts separated by dots: header, payload, signature. The signature is a scrambled string created by hashing the first 2 parts with a secret key that only your server knows. Takes those strings, adds its private secret, runs them through a math function. The result signature looks like this. When the server gets the token back, wait, when was auth token? – 2006. Wow, a long time ago.
And that's way more efficient when dealing with a distributed system in the cloud. However, tokens can still be hijacked by an attacker, and they can also be difficult to invalidate, and they can't be used to authenticate a user in the background on the server. Here's the most important thing to understand. With this However, tokens can still be hijacked by an attacker, and they can also be difficult to invalidate, and they can't be used to authenticate a user in the background on the server. And they can also be difficult to invalidate.
Can be difficult to invalidate a attacker.
And they can't be used to authenticate a user in the background on the server. Here's the most important thing to understand. With a session, the authentication state is handled on the server, while the most difficult to understand. With a session, the authentication state is handled on the server, while tokens are managed on the client. This has been user authentication in 100 seconds. If you want to master web security, check out.
That's a very good video. It gave me an idea of what we're doing. So I'm assuming we're doing this. We have JWT. Yeah, we definitely have JWT. So when the user logs in, we don't store a session ID, generates a JWT, which we store in our environment. Hopefully I don't show that, but that's, I don't know if that's a JWT token though. Dot environment. Yeah, that's it's on the server side. Well, it's on the backend. JWT, it's on the backend. Cookie secret. We have a cookie and a JWT. And a Google client ID. I don't know what all those are for. Vite Google client. We also have a Vite Google client ID. So like all these things, I need to know what the hell they're doing. So we have the Vite Google client ID, UI side. We have a JWT secret. We have cookie secret. Google client ID, Google client secret. Okay, what are all those for? I have no idea. I need to figure that out. So we have these and variables. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know where my phone went. 저거 더 많이 해도 안 된대?
아니면 의자를 내놔. 근데 지금 이렇게 더운 날에 에어컨 틀고 그러면 저희가 냄새 나는 거는 그 사람들 집에도 안 가고 여기가 빨리 가야 되려면
Okay. So I need to be mindful of these four things. User submits login. Instead of storing a session, generates a JWT created with a private key on the server. I wonder if this is I wonder if JWT is the same for everyone. Probably not. Let me check Discord for JWT. Really? Nothing. god, I have 12 minutes. Ugh. 1 hour is not a lot of time, I'm not gonna lie. So, okay. Login page, Google returns ID token credential. What? Use both? I found no email password auth flow in either UI or server code and no runtime super-based client usage. Login starts in Google, then your backend verifies the Google ID token and creates backend verifies Google ID token. Google ID token. Okay. There's a Google ID token. It's a Google ID token. Oh god. Dude, what? This makes no sense. Ugh. Backend endpoint for login is post auth Google. So auth service then sets the HTTP only session cookie. Why? Why do you do that? Why do you do that? This is really nice. 5J, 5K, like 5K, sort of, like from right here, 3J. That's really nice. Oh. I need to log in, please. Why am I distracted all this time? I keep getting distracted. No. Step by step with each files. Login page renders the auth screen. Google sign in button is shown on success. Blah blah blah. The backend endpoint. The Google token shit. Oh my god. AI database with session. We know there is the session based. Most web apps use cookie-based sessions for browser login flows. JWTs are used more for APIs. Big shift is that people are more careful now about where tokens live. Often prefer HTTP only secured cookies. browser still uses cookies. Alright, I think that's an hour. Okay, I got nowhere with that. Fucking hell. I got a little bit of idea of how authentication works. Okay, I'm gonna stream a little bit later again. Alright, gonna take a break.